Responsive web design is all about being flexible, both figuratively with our approach to page design and literally with our responsive layouts. How our designs respond to queries is crucial to responsive design, and in this video, I'll discuss some considerations of flexible design. When you're looking at flexible design considerations, there's plenty of resources out there for it. Responsive web design has really taken off, and you have got the world at your fingertips here. So there's many places to go, but the first place you want to start is with this article, A List Apart. It's written by Ethan Marcotte, and this is what started it all. This is the sort of defining moment for responsive web design, where Ethan Marcotte postulated that this is what we could do and this is how we could make our websites more responsive. So definitely worth a read. We also have things like searches. So if you Google search responsive web design, you're going to get plenty of information in there. And this leads us to some of the different sites that we can look at. So for instance, when we're talking about breakpoints, this is a really useful site called responsivedesign.is, and this actually gives us a list of the various breakpoints that are available for different devices. So for instance, you can see here we have smartphones, portrait and landscape, and then we have a landscape version and a portrait version, iPads, the iPad 3, and so on and so forth, and then the iPhones. So we have all these available to us. They're the Samsung Galaxies. And this is a great resource. But that leads to the next question. And the question becomes, when do we use breakpoints? Well, the thing is, you have to be very, very careful about breakpoints. The general rule of thumb is don't use a whole lot of them. Typically, and again, there's good information out there, so don't just take my word for it. There are plenty of articles out there that discuss when to use the various breakpoints and screen sizes. But generally speaking, 3 is pretty much all you need. So you want one for small screens, and that's your starting point. And then you want one for the mid-range that could be tablets, could be netbooks, small laptop computers, and then you want one for large screens, which would be your desktop computers and your high-resolution devices. But it's still not enough to sort of design that way, because you have to understand modern devices and the fact that even small devices today have very high-res screens. So we're talking about high definition. And it's important to sort of not get caught up in that idea of, okay, I'm going to create a breakpoint for the iPhone 4, and I'm going to create one for the iPhone 5 and one for the iPhone 6 and so on. That's not going to help you. What you need to do is to understand sort of the overarching, more general concepts of responsive web design. So you definitely want to look into that when you're thinking about your flexible design. Now, next, we have some free resources that are out there. There are plenty of good resources like the responsive grid system that's available. These are resources that give you all sorts of responsive type templates, like number of columns and scaling and breakpoints that are simple and easy to use. And there's some markup here on this particular site that you'll see. So we have plenty of great information here, and even sort of an idea of how the grid system works. So that's one free resource. Another one is the Profound Grid, and these are just 2 of many. So get out there and sort of understand what's available to you, but this will really help in your responsive design. And here we have our different grid types that are available under this particular API, things like fixed, responsive fixed, fluid, and so on. So understand what free resources are out there, because oftentimes you won't need to reinvent the wheel. And modern web design programs such as Dreamweaver, for instance, actually have responsive grid built right into it. You can create your responsive grid right out of Dreamweaver from scratch if you want to. And then we have all sorts of different examples and samples that are out there and available to you. And so go out and look around, see what other people are doing with responsive design. So for instance, if I scroll down here, we can see some examples of various responsive designs. And this is really helpful because this might unlock some ideas in your head about what you want to do with your responsive design on your website. So certainly there's a lot of information out there and examples and samples of responsive design. Now, finally, and this is one that you really should take a look at, and, it's not easy to describe. It's better if you just go out and look for it, Responsive Web Design Best Practices. And you get all sorts of great information about best practices in responsive design, because there are best practices and there are ways to do it, not necessarily a right way or a wrong way, but maybe one way and a better way is perhaps the way to look at it. But there's plenty of considerations when you're talking about flexible design, so you need to be able to understand that these resources are all available to you. And again, I highly recommend that you read this article, because this is what started it all in this wonderful thing known as responsive web design.